Well, welcome back, and we are still rolling along here, getting closer to the V8 swap. I'm working on this right now. This is the 8-inch rear axle assembly. This is out of another Falcon. You can also use ones from the same year Fairlanes. No, you can't use one from a Mustang. It doesn't bolt right in. The axle width is different. But I've got this thing all stripped down, as you can see, and just getting it ready to paint it. I got all the parts I need to redo the brakes, and there's my axle shafts over there with the engine, and we have the differential carrier out here on the workbench. All the teeth look fine. I'm not going to do anything to this. There was an idea of putting a limited slip diff in it while I had it apart, but I'm going to hold off on that for now. It can always be done later. I don't know that it's going to be necessary for what we're going to put this car to, but we'll see. If I get tired of doing one-wheel peels, maybe I'll change it. But it's a lot of money for something that I don't know that I'm really going to need if all I'm going to do with this car is just mostly cruise it around. So we'll see. That may change. The rear axle ratio is a 279, which of course is not very performance-oriented. But we only have a 3-speed automatic, so until we would change to something with an overdrive, that's probably what's going to make sense for doing highway miles, and this car is going to see some highway miles. So I don't really want to go up to a 350-ish rear axle ratio at this time. If I was going to put an AOD or a 5-speed Tremec in there or something, that would be different. The 6-cylinder rear axle ratio is very similar to that, and I thought maybe changing it to a different ratio would cause a problem with the speedometer, but I don't remember the exact ratio, but the numerical difference is pretty small, and I actually checked in the parts catalog, and it uses the exact same speedometer drive for both of those axles, so even Ford considers the difference to be negligible. So I'm going to continue on with this, get these brakes redone, get this axle housing painted, and get it all put back together. I have to order the leaf springs. I was waffling on doing that. I thought, maybe I'll just reuse what's there. And then I watched a video where somebody had Ford Torino, I think it was, that they pulled out of a field, and the rear leaf springs looked like the ones in my car, and one of them was snapped in half. So I think I'm going to replace them with new ones. I think that'd be a wise decision at this point. So we're going to do that, and got a couple more product reviews here for you coming up next. And here's a product review. I bought these trunk extension pieces for the floor pan in the back. These are like a fiberboard when they come from the factory, and if they get wet they basically start to fall apart. So I bought these replacements. You can get these from either Autocrafters or Melvin's, maybe some other places. They come as a pair, and they're pre-cut, so I don't have to mess with that or go to Lowe's and get a big 4x8 sheet of this stuff to cut out these two pieces. But what I'll tell you is these don't fit. When you get these things, you're going to have to trim them, usually up by the wheelhouse. They don't seem to fit. They're too long. And these things are buggers to trim. I really couldn't find anything other than maybe a jigsaw, which I unfortunately don't own, to cut these. So I wound up using a cutoff wheel, which didn't like them and took forever. And got them to fit, so that's okay. But then the screw holes, none of the screw holes lined up. The middle ones were pretty close, and I could have made those work. But as you can see here on the back one, it's way off, and the front one I had to extend out towards the inside of the car. So I don't know that these are really worth it. I mean, they're not expensive, but you wind up doing so much work to them that if you have your old ones as patterns, you might as well just cut your own. I don't really see the sense of spending the money on these. And the screws do not come with them. Those are sold separately. The screws are fine. They come with washers. They do not match what was in there because they were a screw with a washer made onto them already. That kind of trim piece. But my screws were so bad I didn't want to try to even reuse them. They were really rusty. So that's my product review on this. I wouldn't buy these again, but if you don't really have the wherewithal to do it. I mean, they're okay. You know, they're not expensive, but honestly, I think I just make my own next time. Another product review is these hood letters I got from Autocrafters, and they're very nice. No complaints at all. I got the ones with the black insets, so I thought they looked nicer, and they were actually cheaper than the straight chrome ones. They fit no problem. Now, getting the old pin bushings out is really difficult, and I wound up just reusing most of them that were in decent enough shape to hold the letters. I did have to replace like 3 of them. The emblems do come with these little pin bushings for the letters, and they're nylon and they're not hard to put in. But getting those old ones out, because I think they're metal, very difficult. There's no access from the underside, so that can be trying. But they look great. I'm very happy with those. Didn't take long at all to do. Unfortunately, we have an unanticipated problem, and this is it. The wipers on this car worked, but they started hanging up partway through the sweep. And if I reached out the window and gave them a poke, they would work. Another sweep, maybe 2. But they seemed to have quit, and I pulled the wiper motor out. And I found the problem. Actually, the motor itself is perfectly fine. But the cover here has you can see the broken piece here. That tab is supposed to be connected to this riveted port up here. And that rides on the outer portion of this gear. And that tells the wipers when to stop and go the other direction, I believe, is what that's for. So the tab snapped off there, and I don't see an easy way to fix that. So what I did was I tried to see if I could get just this cover, maybe as a new old stock part. Because Ford's great for selling individual pieces on these components. And I did look it up in the parts book, and most of the cars you can get that cover separately, but for the Falcon, no bueno, at least not for 1966. So the next thing is that this is a single speed wiper. It basically has an on-off switch. And the not the Futures necessarily, but the option was you could get a 2-speed wiper that had high and low speeds, like most cars were accustomed to today. And that's probably a little bit more common. And those you can find available as remanufactured units, no problem. The single-speed ones, however, nothing out there. I called one of my used part contacts for Falcon parts and had him look to see if he had any, and he didn't have any. So that's disappointing. I'm now on the search for one of these wiper motors in the hopes of finding one that I at least can just get this part, the separate component off of. I don't care if the wiper motor itself works or not, but I do need that cover. And I'm not having any success finding that so far. I'm going to ponder trying to repair that if everything else fails. I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to go about it, but you know, it's a possibility. Maybe we can get this piece. I don't know if it's the same on a Mustang wiper motor. Maybe it's just shaped different, or you know, what have you. I don't know. So I'm going to have to do some digging on getting an education, I guess, on Ford wiper motors in the 1960s. One of the problems I ran into with everything with the front of this is removing the power steering pump resulted in a pulley issue. And I had a pulley that only had one groove in it, and the groove was in the wrong place. So when you go to a non-power steering version, you need a 2-groove pulley so that that front pulley will line up with the drive and the crank and the alternator. It's a little fun finding out what pulley that you need, but what it winds up being is an air-conditioned model 302 from like 1968-69. And I'll save you the trouble because I'll give you the part number. These are reproduced by ACP. You can get them from Autocrafters or a lot of other vendors out there. And it was actually cheaper just to buy a new one than it was to get a used one and try to clean it up, because people were charging ridiculous numbers for these pulleys with the factory numbers stamped in them. I guess restoration geeks really want to have the right thing, but you know, it's a pulley. I don't care. So that's what you need for that if you're going to be doing this. So I'll have to get one belt now that runs around all those three instead of the two belt system that it had previously. So what have I been doing all this time? It's been a long time since an update. Well, I got the exhaust manifolds put on. Ooh, big deal, right? Well, I was worried about having to maybe port these things, but looking at the gaskets and the heads and the headers that were on before and everything, I decided it really wasn't going to make any difference. The manifolds are only so big, so really not a whole lot I could change on there. And these are the solution to keep the column shift in the car, so that's why we're doing this instead of headers. Moving on now to the carburetor. And this, I think, was a problem for the car that it was in before, because it was running really rich. And I've rebuilt the top half so far, cleaned and rebuilt that, and you can see the difference that the ultrasonic cleaner makes just on this only mildly grungy carburetor. But it really cleaned the top up nice. The floats were not set correctly, and that may have been why this thing was running so rich. It might have just been dumping fuel down into the carb itself. So anyway, we've got this thing all cleaned up, and that should run much better. Now I'm still working on the bottom end. I got the parts in the ultrasonic right now, and then we're going to do this bottom housing, which, as you can see, is really grungy. Surprisingly, for what little this car was run, the Mustang that this came off of, I'm kind of disappointed in how dirty that is. So why am I using an Edelbrock? Well, a couple reasons. I used to be a parts seller at a speed shop many years ago, and sold a lot of Holleys, some Edelbrocks, a couple of other brands. Some of the stuff that's out today didn't even exist back then. But the Holley style of carburetor always irritated me with its end bowls, that every time you wanted to take it apart to change a jet or whatever, you wound up spilling gasoline all over your intake. And you know, they always needed gaskets, and the gaskets were expensive, and I was just never really impressed with it. For tunability, certainly they are the best going, and for racing use, I can't argue with them that style of carburetor probably makes the most sense. For a street car, I always like these Edelbrocks because basically it's a Carter. And the nice thing about these is, a lot of people don't know, so they were actually made by, see that W? That's for Weber. And I've always had great luck with Weber carburetors. In fact, Holley bought or licensed the design of the two-barrel Weber that went on pretty much every four-cylinder car in the 80s, which was the Holley 5200. It was on Pintos and everything else. And those carbs were always very easy to work on, very reliable. Had lots of Italian cars with Weber carbs and never really had problems with the carburetors. So I've always had a fondness for Webers, and the fact that they actually make these, or did make these, for Edelbrock is kind of a bonus. Is it a better carb? It's better in some ways and not as good in others, and I just like this top cover design where you take it off and the bowls are still here and you're not dumping gas everywhere, and that's just me. You're not going to save any real money with one of these, because this Edelbrock kit to rebuild this thing is like $50 or $55, and it's nothing special. It's just a bunch of gaskets and, you know, 2 needle-in seats and a couple other parts. It's kind of annoying that I have to pay that much for something that really isn't anything special, but, you know, I guess I'm paying for that. And I'm okay with that, if that's the case. But it just seems like it's a lot of money for what's in the box. I don't know. Tell me in the comments below if you think I'm nuts. So anyway, I'm taking care of this little problem. I'm going to get this thing all set up. I still haven't pulled these out. I don't know how many turns this guy has on these things. That should be interesting to see too. But floats were definitely not set correctly. Way, way, way off. So I straightened that out when I put the top back together. So I've been kind of procrastinating doing this engine conversion, I'll admit, because it's going to be some work and the car's going to be apart, you know. So I'm not going to be able to drive it. And I still like to take it out every once in a while, but I need to get over that and just get it done. And I was bouncing back and forth about which way I wanted to go, where I wanted to start first. Did I want to put the engine in first, or did I want to do way down yonder there, the rear axle and the rear suspension, and converting it to 5-lug and all that. And I was going to do the suspension and brakes first, and then I decided I was going to hold off a little bit on that, because I do have to buy new wheels and tires, because, you know, 5-lug from 4-lug, I don't have any 5-lug wheels unless I steal some off my Mustang, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to buy brand new wheels, and then of course you got to get tires to go with that. And that's, you know, that's a big chunk of money. And doing the engine, the only problem with that is I'm going to have it taken to an exhaust shop to make a system, because there's no bolt-on system that'll work with those manifolds on a Fairlane or Falcon of this vintage. Unfortunately, I thought there might be, but there's not. Not even a white pipe for single exhaust, because I thought I could get a white pipe maybe and just hack the end off and make duals. No such luck. That's what happens when you pick weirdo cars. So anyway, that's where we are currently. Hoping to get this thing bolted to the transmission here probably next week or so. I've got some time off coming up that I took that I want to maybe utilize to do this work, and hopefully finally get this thing in here, get it running, and then get it over to the exhaust shop so they can put the pipes on and get that all street legal, and then, you know, maybe we'll drive it a little bit and see how long that puny little differential lasts behind this engine. Oh my, I hope I have my AAA paid up. All right, that's going to do it for now. Talk to you all again very soon.